this video training information available to others who are unable to attend today. All right, thank you, Margaret, for leading us.
Thank you. So we'll begin with introducing ourselves, and then together we will do an opening prayer. So who wants to be the first one in the Hollywood Squares of 26 to introduce yourself, give me your name, your church, and your financial role in that church?
I will. Can you hear me?
Okay, Julia. Who was it?
Patty.
Okay, Patty, go for it.
Okay, I'm Patty Armstrong with United Methodist Church of Jeffersonville. And I now turn it over to, I think, Paul Thompson.
And what is your financial position?
Oh, I'm the financial secretary.
Okay.
Okay, now to Paul.
Hi, everybody. I'm Paul Thompson. I'm the pastor at the United Methodist Church of Jeffersonville, and I'm also the financial secretary at Westbrookville Community Chapel. And I'll pass it over. I'll pass it over to Bill. Bill, where'd you go? You're there somewhere. There you are.
I'm Bill Seneschal, and I'm the lay leader at the First United Methodist Church in Walton. And I'll turn it over to Lara.
I'm Laura, and I am the interim treasurer and the stewardship chair at the First United Methodist Church of Walton. And I'll pass it to Linda.
Linda Imbor, treasurer of Jeffersonville United Methodist Church. And I don't know who to pass it to because I don't see the names.
Okay, Laura, would you pass it to somebody else then?
This is Diane
Okay,
Bitterman.
I'll pass it to Julia.
Julia went.
Everybody, I'm Julia Davis. I'm with Bullville United Methodist Church. Oh, sorry, and I am treasurer. And I'm going to pass it to Kent Brown.
My name's Kent Brown. I'm the financial secretary at Margaretville United Methodist Church, and I will pass it to our treasurer, Fred Miller.
I'm the treasurer of the Margaretville United Methodist Church, and I guess that's it. My name is Fred Miller, and I'll pass it to, I guess Debbie hasn't spoken yet. I'm not sure. I'm losing track.
I think he said me. I'm Debbie Guptill. I am the treasurer at the First United Methodist in Coxsackie. And I'll pass it to, how about Lori?
Hi, I'm the treasurer at St. James Methodist. Is that all we need? Yes. And Ken?
And I'm the lay leader of co-lay leader with Kathy Dundorf at St. James.
Lee?
Lee Quimby, I think they passed it to you.
Okay, Lee Quimby from St. James United Methodist Church, Kingston, New York, Chair of Finance, and I'll pass it on to Barb Sanborn.
Hi, I'm Barb Sanborn at St. James, and I volunteered to be financial secretary. And then I passed to Julia in Bullville.
I think Julia went, right?
I went, yes.
Okay. How about Barbara Turpening?
I'm Barbara Turpening. I'm from the Memorial United Methodist Church in Modena, and I am the treasurer. And I'll pass it to Ed Horton. Ed, you're muted.
There you go. Is that better? I'm Ed Horton. I'm the treasurer of the Milton Marlboro Methodist Church. Let's see. How about Lori? Lori and Russ?
Oh, who the heck's left?
And I do all the reports for him, so.
Okay. We have Lynn's iPad.
Okay, it's Lynn and Josephine. I am the financial secretary at the Wyndham Hensonville United Methodist Church in Wyndham.
I'm Josephine, and I'm the trustee treasurer in the Wyndham Hensonville United Methodist Church, and I'm the secretary of the Wyndham Hensonville and Ashland Charge.
Okay, we see, we have a few people left. There's Diane Bitterman is left, or Dawn Seneschal, or Brian.
Yep. This is Diane Bitterman. I'm the treasurer of the Catskill United Methodist Church, and then you can pass it to whoever's left. Sorry.
Okay, the Kathy Grossman.
I'm Kathy Grossman, interim finance chairperson at First United Methodist Church in Walton, and I'll go to Dawn Seneschal.
I'm Dawn Seneschal, and I'm assistant treasurer at the Walton First United Methodist Church.
We have Ken from Shandaken, hasn't gone yet.
Hi, I'm Ken from
Shandaken.
Shandaken, financial secretary.
That's the one, right?
And I don't know who hasn't gone yet.
Gary Schmidt hasn't gone yet.
Yeah, I'm Gary Schmidt, Monticello United Methodist Church. Too many hats to count, but I'm here today as chairman of the Finance Committee.
Okay, there's a couple more. I think there's Diane, or I'm sorry, Brian, Nancy McDonald, or Kathy Dundorf. Either one of you, any of you, pop in.
Hello, I'm Brian Hubert. I'm from St. James. I'm just sort of here again listening. I'm here with Kathy and Barb Sanborn and Lee and Ken and Lori, just kind of listening in. They're just kind of showing me the ropes a little bit of how things work. So great to be here.
Hi. I hope I didn't hit my mute.
Okay, we have Nancy McDonald or Kathy Dundorf. Kathy, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Kathy, we can see your lips, but we can't hear you, but we do see you. Okay.
Hi, Kathy. Nancy McDonald, are you there?
Nancy can see and hear, but cannot seem to unmute. Let me see if I can help you with that, Nancy. And Nancy, what church are you from? Put it in the chat. And Nancy,
I think she's from Rock Hill, maybe? I don't know. And I think Shirley Kelly is someplace on here. We haven't heard from Shirley yet.
Emily's definitely here.
Hi, I'm Shirley Kelly. I'm from the Maybrook United Methodist, and I'm the financial secretary.
And Nancy McDonald has said yes, she is from Rock Hill. So is there anybody else that we did not? We did not. All right, so let us take a moment to be in an attitude of prayer. Oh, most gracious and holy God, we've spent today inside on this beautiful spring day, this first day of spring, dealing with missions and ministries of our churches. Why do we do this? God, we love our churches. Even in our most frustrating moments, we do love and care for our churches being the building, the plant, the money, the people, and the people of our communities. So let us be together for the next hour or so and talk about how we, with money, can enrich those ministries and missions of our church. We worship you with great glory and honor in all kinds of ways. And for the next hour or so, with our pencils and papers and our calculators. And let us be together in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about finances. A lot of people would not answer the question, yes, if I were to ask them, are finances a ministry of your church? Are finances a mission of your church? And my answer is yes, they are a critical ministry and mission of your church. As we deal with finances, we have to be stewards of how we raise our money, how we spend our money to do ministry and missions in our church, in our community, and making sure that we're creating new and different and 21st century ministries and missions. It may not be the same fundraiser that we did in 2021 or 2020 or 24. Everything is different today. Money is the same, it's just treated differently. So we're going to talk about some of those things. If you've been on one of these calls before, Ross Williams, who is the chief financial officer of our conference, prepares a PowerPoint that he wants all of us to use in each district when we talk about money, so that we're singing from the same songs of our songbook, so that we're getting the same information. And then we'll answer questions that might be unique to Catskill-Hudson or even unique to your church. So we will begin, and I will tell you that I am not screen share savvy. So we will go to screen share back and forth, okay? And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat or you can ask them. We'll see where we are. Okay. These are some of the items that we will address by name when it comes to finances. So rather than reading them, we'll just go to the next one and you will get a copy of this PowerPoint. One of the things that's frequently asked is, what about our tax exempt status? The United Methodist Church is a tax exempt organization. And we are 501c3 under the tax code. Do you each have a copy of your 501c letter? And you're probably going to tell me no. And if you see further down on this chart, there is a place where you can get that letter, that inclusion letter. And I would suggest that you have one, because in this modern technology, if you want to buy certain kinds of equipment as we are doing more technology, and somebody says, oh, you're a church, do you have your 501c3? And you'll say, no, I don't. If you give them this letter, that will suffice. It's a letter that indicates you're a 501c3 under the United Methodist Church. So I encourage all of you to get one if you do not have it, and keep it in your little folder. That means 501c3 means we're exempt from federal income tax. We're exempt from filing a 990, which many organizations have to do. And it means that donors may deduct their contributions on their tax returns, provided that you, the financial secretary, provide it to them in a timely fashion. I think that Ross has put things in here based on hot topics. His rental of property has become a hot topic. So I'm going to talk about property taxes first. Churches should assume that any property rented to an organization will be put back on the tax rolls. So somebody says, what does that mean? How many of you rent a parsonage to other than a church person and they pay rent? That church needs to be on the tax rolls. I think Modena, you're here, you're an example of a church that probably had to put your parsonage back on a tax roll. If it's used by someone who's doing something for the church, that's a little bit different. But if you're renting in your church building, a large church building, and this does not apply to our district particularly, If you have a full floor of one of your education building that you might be renting to somebody in your municipality, that would go back on the tax rolls. Don't try to hide it because it'll come to haunt you at a later date. Income taxes, that's pretty self-explanatory, but note, again, this could take place in a couple of our churches. The rental of a parking lot is not considered rental of real property and is taxable if you rented your parking lot.
Margaret, would you be
Yes.
able to zoom make your share a little bit bigger without going to full screen? Folks are having a little trouble.
Well, why don't I go to full screen? It's probably easier.
All right.
Is that better?
Yeah. Can you see what you need to see too, Margaret?
I don't need to see you. I can see what I can see.
What you
I'll
need
just let me get in and out of it.
You see the
We're okay.
advance at the bottom. Okay.
Yep. All right. Any questions there? A lot of these things with your property, you will be in a relationship with your trustees. If you were on the trustee call this morning, Karen talked about the issue of renting property, renting parsonages. But you would be in a relationship with that person. Employment taxes. Really important to know the difference between an employee and an independent contractor. So the questions are, and point number 2, significant back taxes, fines, and penalties, they happen, and they happen frequently because someone is given a 1099 and they should have had a W-2, or they weren't given anything. So if you have an organist in your church, 95% of the time that organist should be a W-2. That organist is an employee. And here are the 20 question tests from the IRS. What are the work hours? Do you set the work hours? Is it something that they do every week, all of the time? They come every Sunday. They have regular hours that they have to serve. Oftentimes, secretaries, they can be an employee with a W-2 because they have a set regular hour and they've been hired by the SPR, or you have a person that works 5 to 15 hours a week and they might be paid hourly. So it's a salary versus an hourly payment. So a salary would be a W-2 and an hourly payment would be a 1099. The more important thing is make sure you do it. And for your secretaries, your organist, your sexton, any childcare provider which you pay because it's part of your church, you must withhold and remit federal, state, Social Security, all of those taxes. And you need to keep records on that. When somebody is hired, do you fill out the W-4, which tells you how much they want to have taken out in certain things where they are given options of the percentage, and so that they know what is being taken out. The use of outside people to do your software program is critical. It's very, if you want to use one, you can. Make sure that you can afford it in your budget and don't overpay for someone to do your bookkeeping. Some churches have the idea that it's too much for them to do. Hire someone on the outside to do it, and the cost goes into your budget and it eats your budget. If you spend some time and learn what the specific things you need to do and keep a spreadsheet, whether you're using Excel or QuickBooks or Quicken or whatever you use on a regular basis, most of you can do it yourselves. Housing exclusion and housing allowance. This was again, something was talked about among the trustees because of the trustees' roles in maintaining a parsonage and the trustees' role if the pastor owns their own house. So there is a difference between a housing allowance and a housing exclusion. Do you all know what that is? So a housing exclusion, we're going to start there, is the amount of salary that a pastor designates to treat as non-taxable because it relates to housing issues as a pastor. It is not part of their W-2.
Margaret,
Yes.
before we get too far away, I was trying to ask a question before with the mute on, unfortunately. When we talked about the independent contractor, suppose a church, again, I think I heard you say something about it. If you hire an outside company to do a church dinner, or let's say now under COVID, you hire an outside firm to clean the church. Would that be considered?
All right, we'll start with an outside person to clean the church.
Say that again.
You've hired a contractor to clean the church. If they're paid more than, it would depend on how you hired them. Are you hiring them from the trustee, as a building maintenance, and you're going to pay them a contractual amount every month? You don't need any form, a 1099 or a W-2. You've hired them as part of they're not a regular employee. They're not an employee of the church. They're a contractor.
Okay.
And you pay them that. You don't have to pay, if you hire somebody to mow your lawn, they get paid, they don't get a 1099.
So they're responsible for their own taxes then?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
When somebody to do a dinner, depends on what kind of a corporation or what kind of a business you're hiring. Most of the time you pay them, that's it. When we're talking about those kinds of things, make sure that you are keeping receipts, that you are keeping a contract, whether it be, don't do a verbal contract. If you hire somebody to do something like help with a dinner, make sure it's in writing. It doesn't have to be on embossed paper, but it has to be in writing. It has to be so that when somebody comes to audit your books as the treasurer, that you have documentation that says, I'm looking at my fundraiser, and we had a fundraiser and it was a roast beef dinner, and we hired X company or X people to do the dinner, and we paid them this amount of money. And then when we fit our income in, and our income seems to be, $2,000, we need to deduct from that income the expense to see what your profit was. So you want to know in writing so that you can assess the value of your fundraising event. If you're paying too much for your fundraising event, I wouldn't do it. All right, so we'll go back now to the housing exclusion. So that might be, if a pastor has a parsonage, they might have $2,000 to $4,000 a month. That is, or a year, that is not taxable and not included in their W-2. I think I got the words right, Karen? Now, if a church has, if there is no parsonage and the church has another housing situation for that pastor, the pastor will get a housing allowance. And that is something that is worked out with the SPR, the finance committee, and the trustees. What is that going to be? What does it represent? You don't have anything as a treasurer to do with the money as the local treasurer. You're not going to pay anything for that house. You're not going to pay their utility bills. You're not going to pay any of those kinds of things. They will be responsible for that in most cases because you're giving them that allowance. So we can go back to these at a later time, but I want to get through all of the things that Ross says we have to cover, and then we're going to cover some very specific things that I know that you are looking for.
And
here's
There was one, there was a question in the chat. It's a little bit back to about renting to another 501c3, if you can get to that at some point. And the other thing is, folks, in the chat, I just put a link. We do have an article by Ross on the conference website that addresses clergy housing allowances.
Yep. And I think it's in one of the attachments that I'm sending with this package.
Yes, I believe so.
Yep. And I can't see the chat, so you're gonna have, once I went full screen, so you'll have to do the chats for me.
I'll
Thank
try
you.
to keep my eyes on the chat.
Okay, keep your eyes on the chat. So here's an example of, and this is also in more information that Ross has. There is a parsonage. Pastor A's salary is $40,000. Pastor B's salary is $40,000. Parsonage, yes. Parsonage, no. Housing allowance, no, when there's a parsonage. Housing allowance, yes, when there's no parsonage. And the housing allowance in this particular case is $10,000. Housing exclusion, $2,000 for this particular pastor, $5,000 for the other pastor. Total compensation for Pastor A with a parsonage is $40,000, but their W-2 says $38,000 because the exclusion is not in their W-2. So parsonage, or Pastor B does not have a parsonage, has a housing allowance, and has a housing exclusion. So the exclusion does not go on there. You can see that the total compensation then is 50. And their amount on their W-2 is 35 because both of these items come off of their W-2. And that information should be provided to the treasurers by the SPR at your charge conference every year. What is happening? This is something that is renewed every year. You don't assume it is renewed every year. Any questions there?
I have none in the chat.
Oh, good. So internal controls. Ross is really, really hot on internal controls and making sure that we are not creating any opportunity for anything to go awry. And here are some of his thoughts. It prevents a single person from perpetuating fraud. There's separation of duties, and again, no single person does everything. So in the treasurer's position, it separates income expenses. So your income is a financial secretary and your expenses are the treasurer. So if a church is a very, very tiny church, sometimes the financial chairperson could be one or the other of these in addition, but one person cannot be both of these. So in your churches, do you have a financial secretary and a treasurer?
And on all of these things, pastor or pastor's family does not handle the money.
They don't even
Any
touch
of
it.
these, period.
That is critically important. There are places where a pastor is writing a check from the church's checkbook. Now, the bank should be picking that up if that person is not a signer on the account. And speaking of that, every year you should make sure that your signers, if you add signers or delete signers, that you go to your bank and update who is allowed to sign a check. And make sure that your checkbook is in the name of the church, not the name of a person. And we had up until a couple of years ago, we had at least 6 churches in which the treasurer had the account in their name and under it was the name of the church, rather than the church's name. And if they wanted to, and the person's name shouldn't be on it at all. And no mail or no checks should go to any person's home. They must go to the church. And if your church is closed, somebody needs to pick up the mail or figure out a way to hold the mail at the post office and go pick it up at the post office. But any of this information, any financial information sent to the church must go to the church, not to individual homes. All right, we've talked this financial secretary must be separate and unrelated people. No offering should be counted by two unrelated people. Do all of your churches count money with two people or one? Think about it. Even with COVID, we can figure out a way to have two people counting the money. No person should be able to do more than one of the following: approve payments, sign checks, or reconcile bank accounts. In tiny churches, it becomes more difficult. So sometimes you have to do some of these things in pairs. How many churches require more than one signature on a check? What has happened in larger churches, the checks are signed by two people. In churches that are the size of those in our district, you should have an amount by which a second person needs to sign the check. So your finance committee can determine that. Do you want any check that's above $600 to be signed by two people? I would not include necessarily the pastor's salary in that, but checks, make sure that you are aware of, and your committee is aware of who's signing checks and how much those checks are for. Continuing with Ross's favorite topic, internal controls, keeping offerings securely locked between collection and deposit. Now that's, these are assuming that we're not in COVID, unfortunately, but where do you, in general, keep your money if you don't count it on Sunday? There was a church in our district that used to take their money home. And one day they went to the bank and did their money, but a shrewd person in the church who worked in finances knew that there was more money coming in than what was being deposited. And because the money had gone home and it wasn't in a secure place, someone was taking the money. That quickly ended and we moved forward, but do not, under any circumstances, take your money home. If you count on Monday or on Sunday, is there a drop box that you can put your money in? Most of the banks have the ability for you to drop your money. Or if you don't count it until the next day, is there a secure place in your church where you can lock it? A small safe, a small lockbox, or those kinds of things. For example, in my church, we do not count on Sunday. We count on Monday morning at 8:30. It goes into the money on Sunday, goes into the church safe, along with any other money that has come in during the week, because you count the money that has come in during the week. It all goes into the safe, and then on Monday, the safe is opened and the money is counted and goes to the bank. Maintain bonding on church members handling money. If you have any of the insurance companies that are recommended for churches, this is part of your insurance policy. Strictly limit the use of credit cards to those who have a business need. Single most abused form of church spending. Do your churches need to have a credit card? Some have determined that yes, it makes it easier to get things, and that's fine. Who uses the credit card? How are the credit card receipts accumulated and kept and maintained so that when the bill comes in, we know that that money was authorized by somebody? It might be better to use a debit card than a credit card, because then you don't have credit card fees and you're working, really a debit card is as good as it is like a check. So I would be very, very careful about using credit cards. Internal controls continue on documentation. Support each check issued with written documentation. So this is really part of the financial secretary's role when they are, and the counter's role. When the counter is counting, what do they do with the checks? Do they write the check number down and the name of the person from whom the check was received? Do they make a copy of the check for their files? Whatever your local policy is, make sure you're doing it and make sure that it's documented as to the procedure that you're doing. It frequently happens that someone will call and say, I sent a check to blank church for $25 for Encore Sunday and it still has not been cashed. If you find out when that person sent it, you can go back to your records and say, well, we never received the check. And that's possible with our mail system today. It is possible. Or you can say to the person that check was deposited on X date. So there you have the information to support your answer that you're giving to the person, rather than just saying, well, I didn't see it. I don't know. Documentation. Vendor invoices should be approved and by the ordering party prior to payment. Who is your vendor? If your vendor is your copy machine, your lease on your copy machine, we know, and you know, that is a monthly bill that's going to come in every month. And if you are the treasurer or financial secretary of the treasurer, you know that's going to be paid, and you can just have it on the record of that contract. Yes, the bill came in. Yes, it was paid. But there may be other vendor invoices for something particular, like Sunday school supplies or any number of things like that, where there is an invoice and you need to know, as the treasurer going to pay that bill, who made that payment, who authorized that payment. If it's coming out of Sunday school, they probably have a Sunday school budget and they're keeping track of that. They have to sign off that this is a valid bill before you can pay it. And you make sure you keep a copy, and they should have a copy. We do not really do a very good job in keeping those kinds of records. Well, yeah, that's from Sunday school. They have a budget. That's okay. But all of a sudden it's October and you get a bill for $240 for the next curriculum from Cokesbury, and you've already overspent your budget and you're wondering why. And Sunday school says, well, no, I didn't spend it all. Well, one of the Sunday school teachers spent it and you didn't get the proper authorization and verification of that expense. So now they've gone over their budget, which may be okay, but it's not okay if you're tracking properly. There should have been a warning flag that went up. Counting the offering using a formatted counter sheet and have 2 counters sign the sheet. Do all of you have a counter sheet of some kind? And I will show you a sample of one later and kinds of things that should be on it. And is it signed, in fact, by 2 people? Is it done by 2 people? I would venture to say it is not. It could be done by 2 people, but a counter sheet is not signed. You just put it in the bag and you write out your thing and you go. Make sure that you are following those procedures, especially with money. Any questions there?
Nothing in the chat. We're good.
Okay. Reconciliation. How many of you are up to date in reconciling your bank statements? A very large church should make sure that they're reconciling it every single month. I would say probably St. James, Asbury, New Paltz, churches that are very, very active and have a lot of money going through the bank should be reconciling them every month. Other small churches, if you do it every other month, every 2 months, but they have to be reconciled. Again, there may be a mistake that is not yours. It could be the bank's mistake. They're not infallible. And as they go to new computer systems, there is often mistakes. So it's not doing these things because somebody fears you're doing it wrong. It's to be good stewards of the money that's coming in and going out. You should reconcile the counter sheets with what this financial secretary has. You develop your own methodology of how you're going to do that, when and where, so that what you have said came in on the counter sheet is what the financial secretary says she has when you've given it to her, that you didn't miss something. Some of these I think we may have talked about. Make sure you have your bank signatories looked at annually. All church mail should be sent to the church address. Make sure that you've adopted a policy where you want the 2 signatures on a check. And if you see something that doesn't look right, question it. This is an important one. Do not ignore mail from municipalities. They might be from the tax office, they could be from the assessment office or regulatory authorities. Now, frequently, this kind of mail is often put in the treasurer's mailbox. Whoever takes the mail and sees something from the assessment office in the village of wherever, and they say, oh, I'll give that to the finance chair. Probably should have gone to the trustees. Don't ignore it. It could be some information that you need. We talked earlier in the trustee session about your assessment of your property and your buildings. Whatever your municipality is, however frequently they assess your property, they will send that information to you. It often gets overlooked, but we need that information every year on the statistical tables. So if you have it, and it would probably be given to the trustees because that's their responsibility, then we have the information. It might be something from the IRS that states you sent in your 941, but there was an error on it. You owe $25 because of a math error that was made. And if you ignore it, you're going to get that letter again, and there's going to be penalty and finance charges built on it, and you will have to pay it. So don't ignore those kinds of pieces of mail that you say, well, that's not for me. That's, the church doesn't get that kind of stuff. They do. Minimize the use of petty cash. In some churches, they don't have petty cash at all, and I think that's a good thing. If there's something that absolutely needs to be bought, somebody will buy it and submit their receipt. If it's something that's needed for worship, it would come out of the worship budget, and somebody says, well, go ahead and buy it, give the receipt, we have the money in the budget, and that receipt will come in. We don't need to give them the $25 out of petty cash, because it shouldn't be any more than any $25 in any petty cash situation. Minimize 2 areas of finance that should be kept confidential. Records of giving by a person. That's the responsibility of the financial secretary. That person knows who's given what. Frequently, the finance chair does. So the finance chair and the financial secretary might know that information. Anybody can know that you have given to the church, that you have made a financial commitment to the church. It's the amount that is not anyone's business.
Can I ask, Margaret, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Did you just say the financial secretary and the financial chair can know who has given?
Well, yes, because unless you have a stewardship committee, a financial stewardship committee that takes that information, but the financial secretary needs to know who gave what in order to give them statements. You have committed to $500 to the church, and you've only given $200. You as a financial secretary can say, you are behind in your commitment, is there a problem, or are you going to make it, or those kinds of things. The financial secretary and frequently the finance chair.
But both at the same time could. Yeah, I that's contrary to what I understood. That's why I asked. I'm aware of the financial secretary, but
so what did you understand?
The financial secretary,
if you're in a
and the stewardship
and the chair can know that,
and the stewardship chair,
the finance chair. Actually, if you have a financial stewardship committee, they should be working with the finance committee. They should not be working in isolation. Most small churches, the financial stewardship committee is the finance committee. They don't have a special committee for the stewardship campaign. It's done as one unit. You can have a stewardship committee because stewardship is more than finances. And people have it in their head that the stewardship committee only does financial work. That is not true. There's all kinds of other stewardship endeavors that can happen in a church. And again, go Karen.
So to the question about the, but who sees the record of individual givers?
The financial secretary and sometimes the finance chair.
As a pastor, I articulated very clearly that information wasn't broadly available, and that but the finance secretary had it. And if you needed to make an adjustment, you would just contact the finance secretary. That was not shared.
And that is correct. That is correct. That is correct. We've had experiences in some churches where the financial secretary did not keep sufficient records and the finance chair needed to get involved. But it is the financial secretary that has the responsibility for sending out your statements, whether you do them quarterly, 6 months and yearly, but they must be done yearly, and that they be accurate and address what the commitment level was.
The issue with confidentiality, though, and we try to keep it as confidential as possible, but we have various people that work counting, not always the same 2 or 3 people. And so it can get spread out a little more broadly than 1 or 2 people.
That is a very true statement, Gary. That is a very true statement. The counters do see checks, and when they see the same check month over month, then they make assumptions. And they will frequently speak about somebody's check being, well, I would have thought they could give more, or boy, they give a lot. So I would make sure that your counters are chosen carefully. But that is very, very true that they do see that information. And maybe they need to sign a covenant when they agree to be a counter, that this information is not public information. But you raise a very, very important point.
And we are transparent about our costs, our budgets, our resources, and we file our annual fund balance report or audits, and those are available to anyone who asks, but individual donors' amounts are not.
Mm-hmm.
Bill asked the question, are pastors excluded from seeing a record of individual donors?
Yes, they are not to see individual donations, because that can influence.
And I will tell you, in pastoral circles, I have sat in on conversations where where some pastors or some leaders would say, the pastor should know what everyone is giving, because the pastor should know, if somebody has a pastoral need or how someone's doing. My personal feeling was exactly what Margaret said, and what I think is probably best practice. I don't need to know what individuals are giving. I'm going to nurture and take care of everybody the same, but I'm a human being, and I wouldn't want myself to be swayed, shaped, or influenced in any way by information I don't actually need to know. I can tell if this is a generous spirit or not a generous spirit. Many gifts are financial, many gifts are not. I personally have never felt the need to know what individuals give.
Now,
and
one
that direction. I have heard the other argument, but I think my direction.
Yep, I think Karen is absolutely right. It is not uncommon for pastors to know the names of the people in their congregation who gave. They don't know the amount. Because we might sometimes need a pastor to talk to someone. We might say among your finance committee, well, so-and-so is a member of this church and they don't give at all, not even in the identified giving. They just don't give. And maybe a pastor needs to have a conversation about what's going on in their life, not to ask for money, but are they okay? Because somebody will appear to be fine and they're really suffering. And I'll give you an example in my church in New Paltz. There was a family who gave regularly, not a huge amount, and they stopped immediately, but their outward appearance and their outward everything else not change. And we knew something was wrong, but they hadn't talked to anyone about it. And we had tried through the care team and various other sources to determine what was happening in this family. So we did ask the pastor to somehow have a conversation with, and we found out that the woman had divorced. And what we also found out was that's why she only came to church every other week, because she came to church with her child. Her husband never came to church, but she came with her child. When her ex-husband had the child, she didn't come to church because she didn't want us to ask her, where is the child? And so she was dealing with some financial issues, which were never asked of her by the pastor, but the pastor had a conversation about a lot of things, and we determined that there was a real problem. And then the person came out and said, thank you so much, whoever did it, for having the pastor call me. I wanted to call the pastor, but I didn't know how. I didn't know how to tell them my problem. I didn't know. So part of being in ministry is being alert to some of these things. And we don't have to say what the money was, but the money caused us to ask the question.
Laura Yambor has her hand
So the
raised.
financial secretary, I'm sorry?
Laura Yambor has her hand raised.
Okay. Laura?
Yeah, I mean,
Laura?
you actually just kind of answered that. I raised my hand before you answered the whole question. Because in the past, previous pastors, a couple pastors ago, we were told that the reason the pastor should be aware of it is just for the reason you said, that if somebody say they gave an estimate of giving of, $500 for the year, and they were giving, throughout kind of everything was going good, and all of a sudden it just either went away completely or it went significantly down, that the pastor had said that was kind of his cue to see if there's something that we can help with. There's, if there's an issue that needs to be addressed. So what you're saying is that's not the pastor. The pastor shouldn't be having his thumb on that. The financial secretary should, to be able to tell the pastor that.
Yeah, the financial secretary might say to the finance chair in a finance meeting, I haven't seen any pledges coming in from person X, not telling us the amount, but I haven't seen anything coming in. I think something might be wrong. And then the finance secretary or the chair would go to the pastor and say, maybe there's a discussion that's needed, but they don't need to know anything about specifics with the money.
Margaret, that should be said in an open finance meeting as opposed to the financial secretary just speaking directly to the pastor?
Depends on how your finance committee is. It depends on how if some finance committees are very large, then I wouldn't do it there. Some finance committees are very small, and it may be that the finance secretary would talk to the finance chair. The finance chair should know that there's something going on as well. So it could be not a big open meeting. No, I wouldn't do that in a big open meeting. Use discretion wherever.
Yeah, okay.
Gary Schmidt has his hand up, I believe. Gary, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, not to prolong this discussion too long on confidentiality. And we've always kept it fairly, very confidential. Years ago, it was more. But I remember going to a finance seminar at Epworth in the 70s. And I don't know who put it on. The speaker, though, said, you should post what people give in the narthex so everybody can.
Oh, I know.
You here went to that.
I was not involved at that time, but I remember I was going to my church, and that happened in my church after they had gone to that meeting, Gary.
Well,
at Epworth, and there was an uproar.
Yeah. Well, we never did it, but one of the things that came out of it to sort of guide the thinking is that sometimes in a church, the squeakiest wheel and the noisiest member, the most demanding member, gives the least or doesn't give at all. And that was some of what came out of that, you know.
Yes, and I think,
saying
yes,
that you shouldn't pay attention to them, but you know, where's their commitment?
so I think what has to happen is when you do a financial stewardship campaign, and if you're doing it within the finance or what, or your own, or stewardship is doing it, you know who's given. And so you promote the campaign and say, well, we've heard from 90% of our people. And if you use the Frontier Foundation's Consecration Sunday, are you stepping towards tithing? And we have some folks in this church who have done that. They've raised their amount by X dollars, $5 a week, or $10, or 5%, or 3%. And we have others that haven't really come to terms with what it means to commit. And the financial secretary often has their eye on that and can work towards making it happen. But yes, it was a way to try to get more people to donate, to get the squeaky wheel to give the money. But it certainly caused an uproar. Karen, do you remember that?
No, blissfully no. But I would note a couple of things. And one is the size of the gift is relative to the donor. I remember the widow's 2 mites. She put in all that she had, all that she had. Number one. Number two, all gifts are not financial. We do expect that we give of our financial resources as well as so many other things, of our time, our energy. I knew a church where a person cleaned the church, was unable to give money, but worked as a professional cleaner and cleaned the church every week, unbeknownst to pretty much anybody in the church I happen to know. But that was a donation, sure as anybody else's. And remember, we are using our best financial tools to steward these resources to the best of our ability for the glory of God and to love God and neighbor. So if we are undertaking practices that harm, shame, humiliate, coerce, or any of those things, persons, that's not the glory of God. So that's not our business. And we're not a business making money. We're not about our bottom line. Our bottom line is changed lives. So we're going to steward our resources effectively. We are not going to harm anybody doing it.
So the point that Karen raises about people giving in goods and services is critically important, because there are those people who cannot give and do provide a service in lieu of that cash. They need to have the same letter of donation given to them, because what is that value worth? If you were to hire someone to do the cleaning in your church, what would it cost? And that is the value of that person's contribution. So that would be what you would put in their letter of thank you at the end of the year, that says this, we thank you, and this is the value of what you have given to the church. It is as good as cash, because guess what? There's a line on your operating budget that you have not needed to write a check to pay, because you have someone doing ministry of cleaning.
And the one thing that Margaret touches on saying that, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Stewardship and finance people, we are constantly going to be saying thank you all year long. Thank you for your support. Thank you for services and finances. Thank you, thank you.
And that brings to point the young people in our churches. The young people can make a financial commitment. If they have Sunday school, they might have Sunday school offering. We don't take an offering in my church in Sunday school. We have about 5 little children. They're now growing up, but the mother of 2 of them said, my children need to make a financial commitment to this church. And so they fill out the commitment card, and their 50 cents a week means a lot to them. As a matter of fact, the older child asked in July why she didn't get her mid-year statement. And the financial secretary said, oh, I didn't think you would want it. She said, yes, I need it. I have to keep track of my allowance. And so don't think that children are too little to make a commitment, a financial commitment to your church. This child is now in middle school, and I won't say her name, but I'll talk about her money. It started at 50 cents a week. It is now $2 a week.
Stewardship and giving is a lifestyle. It's not a purchasing thing, but it's a way of living out of God's abundance that we learn and teach at every single age. In the chat, Margaret, there are two things that are related. Is there a way to value services donated? And Kent noted, it is important to note the IRS requires that the donor specify the value of non-cash gifts. And even if you're not providing, by the way, a value statement, you can still give a thank you. And I know a church that there was a person who mowed all mowing season. And once a year, the board of trustees gave a steward's card for $150 to that person who did all the mowing. Just a way of saying thank you. It wasn't a statement of the value of what they had given. They weren't interested in that, but they graciously received the gas card, or rather it was a steward's gift card.
To answer part of Ken's question, the IRS does provide some numbers as to what is the value of certain work that's done, certain gifts that are given, and use the IRS as a resource. However, you might use what is your community? What is the cost of somebody doing housekeeping in your community? And you give it that value. And the IRS will generally accept those kinds of things. But don't give something exorbitant. And make sure that you've done your research to find out what it is. For example, when you go to some of these places to make a donation to Goodwill or Salvation Army or all of those, there is a listing of what the value of your gifts are to them, and that's the financial value you would use. Frequently, they'll just give you a piece of paper and say, well, you fill it in. So what do you all do? We all up it about 200%. But if they were to do it as they should, there is a list of what that gift is worth. Does that answer it, Kent?
Yeah, it wasn't really a question, but having worked in a lot of nonprofits, if someone donates something to the church, you want them to specify what the value is rather than just making it up.
Oh, absolutely. It should be a relationship.
Right.
Between the person who gives the service or the gift and you, the treasurer, or the financial whomever, financial chair. Yes. Don't make it up. Do a little research. Do a little work. Okay, audits. How many of you have done your audits? If I were to see the screen and ask you to raise your hands, would I see any hands that said, no, I didn't do it, or yes, I did do it? We don't like to do audits. Audits are not hard to do. And the Book of Discipline requires that you do an audit. So if you go check the Book of Discipline, you'll find out in paragraph 258.4. Yes. Now, we are small churches. Don't go out and hire an auditor for $400, $700, or whatever to do your audit. Your audit can be done by non-financial related people in the church. You need to look at your bank. They need to look at your bank statements. They need to look at your bills. They need to do an audit, a review that things are in order, that you didn't write checks. Well, today I pull out a check and it's check number 24. And tomorrow, I'll just go in and pull out a check and it's 92. So where's your order of checks? So there is a way to do an audit, and we can spend time, if you need it from your church, on some suggested ways to do audits in small churches. But it must be done. And it is not the report of the finance committee that is sent to the district office that is the audit. That just says you did it or you didn't. Any questions on audits? Because we could spend a whole session on just audits. The finance committee is charged with ensuring that the audits are performed. Now, audits need to be done on trustees. Audits need to be done on the operating budget. Audits need to be done on UMW. Audits need to be done on every single account you have in your church, without exception. Question? I would suggest that you download, it's about 50, 60 pages. Questions related to audits. It'll be more than you'll ever want to read, but it talks about the importance.
I've also put into the chat a link that you could click on for the GCF&A guide. The GCF&A is the General Council on Finance and Administration. They do have resources for local churches. This is a local church audit guide published by the General Council on Finance and Administration.
And I must say that one's easier to understand than this one is.
Okay.
Okay, so audits are meant to be an assurance that we've practiced the proper handling of our money and our assets. If you have a preschool that you are in charge of, that the church is responsible for, that those books need to be audited. If you have a preschool in your church that is independent, then you do not audit it. That's their problem. That's their problem. That's their business. You will audit it only if it's part of your church. UMM, UMW, trustees, operating account. All of those accounts must be audited. Audit reports, it says here, and I'm not sure that we collect them, but audit reports provided to the district superintendent at the time of charge conference. What I think Ross is referring to is the finance report, the annual finance report, which says that an audit was done. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, that particular report, because that asks a lot of questions, good questions. Why do we do an audit? People always say, well, everything's fine. We're a small church, blah, blah, blah. Read these. These are some of the reasons that churches have gotten in trouble. That they haven't paid attention to what's coming in and what's going out. And none of it is intentional. It is often not intentional when something happens, but if it keeps perpetuating itself because the person doesn't know, then you will have a problem. So it's just being good stewards of our money. In your churches, it is necessary that you send out a giving letter once a year. It is required. It is suggested that it be quarterly or at least twice a year. And what this does, it just reminds the people, it's another thank you. You thank them for their gift. And this has been your commitment to date. And we are starting to use the word commitment rather than pledge. And that it has been said, I like the word commitment, so it doesn't matter. Pledge is like paying your dues to a club. We are not a club. We are committing to the glory of God to do ministry and mission in our local church. So therefore, we have made a commitment. Now that commitment may not be able to be filled, but we have committed to try to make this gift. So letting somebody know mid-year, and they may just say to themselves, oh my goodness, I forgot. And so this brings me up to the point that if you think about it, even small churches should be investing in online giving. If you have somebody who forgets because they're busy, and you have a contract or a relationship with Venco or Tithely or one of these online giving programs, you can set it up so that comes out of their check or their credit card at the interval that they want. Monthly, weekly, every 2 weeks, whatever. I can't see all of you, but would you raise your hand so that Karen can see how many people do online giving?
I am not seeing any hands. It's a little bit of a surprise to me. Wait, Patricia's got her hand up.
What church?
Jeffersonville, but that may be I don't know if that's a question or we've been doing some online giving.
So online giving,
Barb
I'm sorry.
wait, Barb wants a clarification. Do you mean that do we give personally, or does the church offer an avenue for giving
The
electronic?
church offers an avenue for people to make their contribution online.
There you go.
And I would recommend Venko. Now, when the pandemic started, the annual conference created the opportunity for for people to give online because our church buildings were closed and we were worshiping remotely. Very few actually took advantage of this, but the money was then in your bank the next day. So people gave they had to give by credit card. At the end of 2020, the annual conference said, we can't do this anymore. We have contracted with Venko, which is primarily works with churches, from a very tiny, tiny, tiny church to mega churches in dealing with online giving. So I'll give you an example. New Paltz had not done online giving till the pandemic started. Pandemic started, we did online giving. Our income was more than if we had been in person, because people who were worshiping with us online made a donation. So when the opportunity for Venko came, I said, okay, this is time. We do this. Oh, Venko is a big company. It's going to be hard to do. And I'm old and I don't like all this computer stuff. Well, let me tell you, they will hold your hand and work with you right through it. The fee is a reduced fee from other companies. There's a fee if you use a credit card, and there's a small fee if you use a check. The giver can pay for that or not. It is easy to do. So I challenge you that by the end of 2021, we want to see 10% additional churches using Venko or some online giving.
Or some online giving action. So let me ask you, how many of you pay a utility bill, a phone, an electric, whatever, by electronic funds transfer or online in effect? Any of you? All right, now here's the thing. If we want people to give to the church, we need to make it doable the ways they do other things with money in their lives. And I'm looking on this call, and with the exception possibly of Gideon, we are of a certain age, but the generations behind us are utilizing they are taking care of their financial responsibilities and their giving through other means. I'm sorry, Brian, you're a part of that exception too. They may carry cash. They have no idea how to write a check, and they rarely use the mail. So that's the one thing we need to keep in mind. Number two, even our people who are most committed to giving to the church sometimes forget to bring their checkbook, or forget when they're in Florida to write their check, even though they are committed to giving to the church. At a church I served, we had both Venko, and then we sat with people and talked about, we gave them the forms for electronic funds transfer if they wanted to set up their donation, because they were like, I want to give to the church regularly. I'm always forgetting. I need it easier for me. So we would sit with them and say, we'll make it easy for you. You can adjust it at any time, but here's an avenue for you to giving. And it wasn't just young persons. It was also older persons and people who were steady in their giving, who were relieved to not have to remember to write a check and put it in the mail. So this is one of those cases we don't want to be sitting on the stagecoach waving at the electric car. We want to be sure that every generation and every household has a means to support their church if that is their desire and intention.
One of the questions that has come up with that kind of online giving is, someone said to me, well, I want to make a donation to the Special Sundays, and if I send it in this way, will it be so allocated? And you set that up when you create your Venko system. For example, you can say, oh, there's the general fund, there's special fund, and any other event. You can have one that's for fundraising only. So when you do a fundraiser and someone buys a ticket online, it will go to that fundraising line so we can track how much is coming into finance. There is so many things that will enhance our ability to track people's giving with them not worrying about it at all. And there's also, for the people who are on their digital phone all the time, there is now an app that you could have on your phone for Vanco. So it really is an important way to give.
Right. So, Bill put in the chat, it should never be required.
Never.
Right. It's not required. It's but one of many means. If we give people as many avenues as makes sense to them to give, and they will. I've seen it. I can testify to it. But Pat, Pat Armstrong, you have your little Zoom hand up. Did you have a question?
No, it was answered. Thank you.
Very good. So that I think we're all current. Let me look. I'm looking at the chat again. Okay, good. Yes, we're all current.
So Bill raises a good point. Nothing should be demanded of them. But if we don't educate and we think because someone is of an elderly age, they won't want to do it. And those are the people that are jumping on first to do it.
Snowbirds generally love this.
Yes,
And
the snowbirds do love it. Yes.
Your DS sometimes forgets her checkbook when she visits, and it's kind of handy for me when I can go on my phone and make a donation to your church while I'm sitting in the pew remembering it.
And can you share with us the link to get to Vanco?
Yes, I will. I will be sharing it with you, the link to go to Vanco. And if you tell them that it came from the New York Annual Conference, they will be very, very happy.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to talk about the pastor's reimbursement account. You know that all pastors have a reimbursement account. The minimum is set by annual conference. And if you are less than full-time, you are prorated. You should have, as a church, you should have some guidelines on the pastor's reimbursement account. Any money you give to your pastor for this account has to have a receipt. And any money remaining in that account at the end of the year expires. And these are some of the things that your reimbursement account, the pastor's reimbursement account, can be used for. And you'll see that one of the items on there says the account cannot be divided into installments and paid to the pastor. And I do know that there are churches within our district that take that amount of money divided by 12 and every month give 1/12 to their pastor when they get their paycheck. That is not allowed. So if you're doing it, cease to do it before we do an audit in that church, or before you do an audit in that church.
Or if you do it, it's part of their salary and income, and it is not a reimbursement account anymore.
That's correct. And it goes into, therefore, it goes into their W-2. Any questions on the reimbursement account?
Margaret, there's a question from Kathy. Is the annual amount divided in half if your pastor is retiring, or I would add, or moving in June?
No. No, it is not.
Elaborate on that so that our pastor could reimburse their.
Some pastors, let's say a pastor is going to do some continuing education and it costs $3,000 and it's in March. That's more than half of that amount. So it's not the 5850 is not divided in half. It is what they use at a particular time. So if a pastor leaves in June and they've spent 3/4 of their reimbursable account and you only have the minimum in your budget and a new pastor comes in, the finance committee needs to negotiate and work with SPR to say, this is what's remaining, but if these are reasonable expenses, then we will go over in our reimbursement money. So you don't divide it in half. You don't know at the beginning of the year that your pastor is leaving or retiring in June necessarily. So it is spent as the pastor sees fit for it to be spent. And if the pastor leaves and a new pastor comes in and needs to buy new vestments or something, and it's going to go over, then you know that information. They should be letting you know that, and you will go over that amount in your budget.
I do hope that your pastors help you plan for unanticipated expenses, but it is part of the reimbursement. Bill has a question in the chat. Can a church require itemized mileage records of a pastor for reimbursement?
My church does.
I provide them.
I would say that they should be. They should say, actually, the previous pastor that was in New Paltz, every month I would get from her, actually every 2 months, is when she did her mileage, the date, where she went, and she took the mileage from the computer. So she knew if it was 12.5 miles, that's what it said. So yes, they should estimate, they should give you the actual miles that were there. Other questions?
Bill said we were told it was not. Bill, can you be more, what were you told? Just so I can clarify.
We were told that we could require the pastor that he didn't have to fill out the mileage forms that we provided for him with the mileage records on the odometer and where he went and so on and so forth. We told him he did not have to name specific people that he visited, but it was asked that he at least
So
require
here,
where he went.
that's a good question, Bill. That's a good question. So, and we don't ask them to write the odometer down. We ask them to put what the miles were. So they went to the hospital. So it says hospital, 8.4 miles. It said visitation, 2.6 miles. It said I had annual conference for a meeting, X number of miles. So they didn't need to list anybody's name, where they went. It had to be the total mile, the mileage for that event. If it was visitation, it had to say visitation.
Yep, that's the practice, Bill.
Thank you.
Some people this is naughty to talk about pastors because we do have a pastor on here, but some pastors will say, well, I don't use my reimbursable for other things. So I'm just going to say I had $600 in mileage this month and put it in without the explanation. You have the right as the people from finance to say, we need to have this form. And if this form is not done properly, I would say you should go to your DS.
The conference website does have sample policies and ways to do that.
There, speaking of the conference website, there is tons of things on the conference to look at for these kinds of things. All right, we're going to go on because some pastors' discretionary account. Some churches have a discretionary account for their pastor, others do not. Sometimes it's funded out of the operating budget. Sometimes it's funded from some other donation, special donation. Here's where the details are not disclosed by the pastor. But the pastor has to keep very detailed records if for the audit, in the event of an audit. And they must be ministry related expenses.
Margaret, we have a question in the chat. What about paying sales tax on pastoral receipts?
Paying sales tax on what kinds of receipts for what? Is my question back.
I think, yeah, if you want to elaborate on that, Diane, I could also say, but Diane, you're unmuted, I think. Or not.
If you're talking about if a pastor submits
Purchases
something
of any type, yes, that's right. Books, whatever, books, investments.
they should actually, they can be using the church's tax exempt number for purchases, and then they wouldn't be charged tax. You need to make that a local decision in your church. In my church, my pastor says, I've spent the money, I didn't have the account, I pay the taxes. Other churches will say, we'll eat the taxes. I don't know that there is a policy. I've not seen one.
There is not. And, you know, it depends on how much documentation and how much minutia we want to have to attend to.
So I'll give you my personal answer as the finance person. If they bought 5 books because they're taking a course, or they bought them to lead in worship, and it came to $15 plus tax, I'd pay the total amount to that pastor. It's in their discretionary fund. When they use the money up, you tell them this is where you are.
Yes, Margaret, I think that's a good caveat and reminder too. There is a set amount. We adopted.
Good question. That's a very good question, though. Okay.
Margaret, was one other thing concerning that thing I brought up before. I realized that maybe you didn't have to show the odometer readings and everything else, but each time the vehicle was used, should it have listed at least like home visit or hospital or something like that?
Yeah, that's what I
specifically?
said.
That's what I was,
Yes.
yeah, of course.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, it doesn't have the odometer, but if they went to the hospital, it should say hospital.
okay,
If they went for a visitation, it should say home visit.
okay,
If they went to a meeting in White Plains, they should say White Plains, because that mileage, if they just say meeting, and that's going to be a higher amount, especially going from Walton to White Plains. Somebody might say, if you have a new person in your church who's going to be the treasurer, they're going to say, woo. So they need to say, if they're going to a meeting, what city is it in? And they have to put the mileage. So if they went to the hospital in Poughkeepsie, it would be Walton to Poughkeepsie and return. If they
Not
did a
just-
visitation, I'm
not
sorry.
not just a general, I drove this many miles this week.
No, you need to know where they went,
Okay, thank you.
because not all of the mileage on their car comes to the church.
Right.
And there was a pastor who did that. That pastor's no longer employed. They retired. The pastor would drive, he would set his odometer on Monday and he would record it on Friday, and every place he drove, that was part of, and that was picked up pretty quickly. We're not trying to be mean. We're trying to be good stewards. We're trying to do the work of making sure that we're doing ministry and mission in our churches, so that there's money spent on other things. If that bill is $25 and it really should only be 10, there's money that could be spent for something else.
Now, Margaret, I had a question. Now, is it
Yep.
is it like do they have because when I used to work at the Freeman, it used to be like, you had to do the mileage like based on wherever you went from, like the office or to wherever story it was, and you had to tell them how far you went and what story you were assigned to and everything. And did they ever? And the other question was do they have a minimum? Because like I was in a union shop and there was like a minimum $10 that they gave you
No,
if you went out of
no.
the office. So no minimum for the
No,
pastors.
if they go from their house, from their church, because their parsonages are usually at the church, if they go from their church to, let's say, in New Paltz, if they went from the church to Blues Nursing Home or to Woodland Pond, which are less than 2 miles, they can put in mileage for that.
But there's no minimum dollar amount. They're just going to get the normal rate, because we had like a $10.
Oh, there's a rate. There's a rate that they get paid at, it's set every year at 50 whatever cents a mile.
Got it.
If they only drive a half a mile, they are entitled to put that mileage in.
Yep. God, I see. It works a little bit different than the paper, because they used to give us like $10, even if we only went like a mile. There was
No,
like a
you
floor.
don't get the
and then
money
from
until
there-
you don't get the money till you've driven the miles.
Yeah, so no floor then. No like just base amount then. Got it.
No. You have to account for every mile.
Understood.
Yep. Good question.
All right, thanks.
Let's see. One of the things they say, authority and secrecy. I want to move to other areas because we have we're on the lower stretch. So I will make sure. One of the things is that all meetings except for SPR, are open. Did you know that? So that you can go, you would have voice, but not vote.
Yes,
So
we
we're
are
gonna-
transparent about our finances, except about individual givers.
Mhm. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about budgeting. I know that small churches do not do budgets every year. They take last year's and make it their budget for the current year. I really frown upon that. It may be, in fact, be what's true, but don't take that attitude. Take the attitude of creating a new budget every year, because if you don't dream, you will never get. If you don't dream for the things that you want to do in your church and in your community, you will not get. So that the budget is prepared really by asking each of your each of your committees, what do they want? What do they need? And do a dream budget. What would they like? If all things could happen, what would they like? Now, of course, you will probably need to pare it back. But if you don't come up with something that's real in their mind for what they want to do, how they want to grow Sunday school, then you're going to have the same Sunday school over and over again. But if they say, we would like to do this curriculum, that can energize, and we might find ways to bring in that money by doing a creative fundraising event for that money, so that you gain money, you gain people, you gain more money. You're doing ministry, and you, the finance committee, are supporting that ministry by asking your committees to give us what they really would like. And the first time you do that, it'll all get cut back to nothing, and they'll get discouraged, and then they'll go back to the same hole again. But you can't do it if you will never get any place if you don't dream big. Now, budgets should be both an expense budget and an income budget. You really need to prepare both. What is your projected income? So if you have not done a financial stewardship campaign in 2 or 3 years, it's time to do one. There's lots of canned ones that are excellent. The Frontier Foundation does Consecration Sunday. There's Extravagant Generosity, which was put together by, who's the guy that did this? The 5. Anyway.
Schnees.
Yep, Schnees. There's at least 5 very, very good ones out there to do. Now, if you don't want to do one of those big ones every year, and in between you do small ones that you create yourself. If you went on to the discipleship website, Ken Sloan, who is in discipleship ministry, is the finance guru. He's got some wonderful ideas for creating. You do the creation, but he gives you the ideas of creating financial stewardship campaigns that do work, and they involve participation from your members. Like, one of the questions might be, what fills you the most about your church? What are you thankful for? And so you have 4 Sundays of a series of questions. Now it's time to make your commitment, and you have your pledge Sunday. So you should do, and that creates your base income. Whatever that total is, that's your commitment from your congregation. And then you've already done perhaps your expense budget. What is your pastor salary? That comes from SPR. They bring it to you. That gets approved at your charge conference, your pastor salary. You have to determine your salaries for your other staff if you work with SPR with that. And SPR might say, we'd like to give a person a 5% raise, and you might say, we can only do a 2% raise. But start out with the 5 and then cut back if you need to. You should be going to your education folks. You should be going to, if you have a worship team that does visual arts, what do they need? What are the supplies that they might need? Go to all of your ministries. What do they want? What do they need to do the kinds of ministry they want? And create this budget, knowing that you will have to have version 2, 3, and maybe 4. Again, you don't dream big, you'll never get it. Then you take your income budget, you know what your commitment is. What are the other areas from which you get resources? You have fundraising, taking the D off and making them fun, and making them ministries first, which create money. If everything you do to bring in money is a ministry, so you do an annual turkey dinner, make it a ministry first. It's a way for the community to gather. It's a way for, if you are doing that ministry for people in your community only, or in your church only, make it a ministry first. The finances are the byproduct. You'll get more money. Do you have sources of income from your, let's say you have an endowment, and if you have it with Frontier Foundation, create a formula by which the operating budget might get a percentage of the interest that was earned this year. The great person to talk to on this is Daniel Rubeck. He's on the board of the Frontier Foundation. And New Paltz got $12,000 this year because we had invested all of our money in the Frontier Foundation, and we have this rolling formula. So when people were losing money, we did not, and we had that money come into our operating budget. That percentage, some of it went to trustees and some of it went to mission. So we have a formula where various pieces go to various places. Do you have other funds from which you get money? There's a limited amount of areas from which you can get money, but there's not. Are there grants you can get for special projects? The Sunday school folks want to do X. Have you looked to determine where are some resources for money for these kinds of activities?
Margaret, can you do a quick, unless we are assuming that people know what the Frontier Foundation is, could you just quickly say?
Yes, the Frontier Foundation is kind of our, it's our certificate of deposit location. If you had a CD, rather than putting it in the bank, you put it with the bank of the Frontier Foundation. It is a resource for us for holding our money, growing our money, and distributing our money in the New York Conference and the Upper New York Conference. They will come out and work with you if you want to do a capital campaign on what is the best way to do it, help you through the nuts and bolts to do a capital campaign. They will come out and do a stewardship campaign for you. They will come out and actually talk about money in any way you want them to do it. When you have questions on your sum, how do you want to invest it? The rates that the Foundation charges are less than the rates you would get on the open market. And you are benefiting the church, the greater church. We've almost got 50 million invested. We're 49 million invested in the Frontier Foundation as of the end of March, or the end of the year. Ellen Knutson is the president of the foundation. Daniel Rubeck, who is a member of our district, is the treasurer of the foundation. So I would actually, if you have interest in the foundation, ask him, and he will create the opportunities for you to meet with him. I'm on the board as well, and I come out and do Consecration Sunday or stewardship campaigns with churches. It is a great resource for investing your money. You want to say more about that, Karen?
No, they're just those basic pieces. They get church and they get us.
They get it. And the members of the board are all members of Methodist churches in New York and Upper New York Conference. Okay. Other questions on filing your tax reports. The main one that I want to remind you is that you have to file a 941 quarterly payroll tax report. And if you don't, the IRS will come and get you. And if you file it late, they will also send you a little thing that says you owe 74 cents because you filed it on the 1st of May rather than April 30th. Believe me, they do. I've experienced it. The information is all online from the IRS. The forms are on there and the instructions are on there, and they are very, very clear. And you can file it all online, print it out and mail it, or you can do it online, send it online. Remember that your 1099s and your W-2s have to be given out by a certain date, and your W-3s have to be submitted by a certain date. Health and benefits and all of those kinds of things. So if your pastor is a full-time or actually a 3/4 time or greater, they have their health plan through HealthFlex.
Episcopal here refers to simply bishop.
Yes.
We have a bishop. It's not about the Episcopal Church. We have a bishop who appoints.
Yes, just like it's the Episcopal Committee. Everybody complains, but the uniform rate billed to all churches for full-time employees or 3/4 MB is $18,000 a year, 18,240. It's a big amount of money. It's a big amount of money, but we all get the same thing. You get a bill every month from annual conference with your monthly statement on it, your monthly invoice to pay. Now, there are other, depending on, I think in our situation in Catskill Hudson, we have a lot of less than full-time pastors. And so the clergy benefits are really unique to almost that church, what they're doing. So we need to talk about that almost individually, but make sure your pastor has insurance, has health insurance.
Yes, and your DS will talk with you individually about that where you're less than full-time. 3/4 and full, we participate in Health Flex, period. But at half and below, your DS will talk with you about providing health insurance for your pastor, how we can make sure this individual or family are in fact insured.
And there are different ways to do it. Sometimes it will be complicated and sometimes it's easy. But your pastor should have health insurance and you, the church, should be part of that payment. And then they have other options in which part of, for example, the health insurance for a full-time or 3/4 time, they pay 10% of it comes out of their salary that they pay towards that amount. And that is also tax deductible and does not get recorded on their W-2. Benefits, if you're under appointment, you have your benefit program, item A. Item B, you have the opportunity, and it's administered by with the church directly with WestPath. We have pastors that are involved in that from our district. The situation with health and pensions, I think is a topic that almost, because if they're less than full-time, becomes an individual situation, because each church has a unique situation that's under a particular guideline. Now, it's time to pay apportionments. And I said to Karen earlier, one of the things that Ross did was take out all the apportionment data on what are apportionments and just put in this lovely remittance thing. There is a whole PowerPoint, and I'm going to share it with you when we send out the details on apportionments. Because many people think that the apportionments are only what are on, only things that go out of our district, out of our conference. They're not. Apportionment dollars stay within the church, within the conference. They allow us to go to certain trainings. There's so many good things about apportionments.
They stay in the district in a bunch of different ways and in our local churches.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
Yes, I'm very aware, but we won't spend a lot of time, but trust me, it's here.
I'm going to send the PowerPoint on apportionments, and would also be willing to spend time and do another short session with people who want to know how they're more about apportionments. But apportionments are submitted on this particular form. Don't submit it any other way. This is a must, because if you do it another way, your dollars might not get where they belong. This is on the website. It can be either a PDF file, so you can do it online, or you can print it and fill it in and send it. And you know what your apportionments are, usually in September for the following year. And your apportionments are determined from the statistical tables, tables 1, 2, and 3. As a treasurer of your local church, you're responsible for information on table 2. As the treasurer. As the financial secretary, you are responsible for items on table 3. Table 2 are the expenses, that which we pay. Table 3 has that which we take in. In addition, if you are a treasurer of the trustees, you will be responsible for items on both table 2 and table 3. And that's a whole PowerPoint. Karen, Judy Walters, and I have completed a training session on statistical tables, which can be part of it is a PowerPoint on what it is and then how to do the forms. So I think that would be important, maybe that we do that the next statistical training year.
Yes, and Diane has a question. There was just a general UMCOR envelope in our packages. I don't see a general UMCOR line on this form. How do we get this to them?
Okay, UMCOR is, he has an old form here. UMCOR is 1 great hour of sharing. If you put the new form in, it would say UMCOR rather than 1 great hour of sharing.
Right, it's now the fourth Sunday of Advent is, Lent is now UMCOR Sunday, has to do with its history. But there are other times of year you can give to UMCOR, and I believe that for specific causes or in general.
Yes, so
note that on the
you
form.
would use this form. You would still use this form. If you send it to UMCOR directly, which you can do, the church will not get credit for it. The conference will not get credit for it. Therefore, your church will not get credit for participating because this is summarized. This form, if you're giving 1 great hour of sharing or UMCOR Sunday, but other remittances, see where it says other remittances? That's where you would type in. If you were giving it to an UMCOR special project, you would type UMCOR and what it was. So if it was UMCOR Puerto Rico, we would put UMCOR Puerto Rico and put the money in there. You can see under special appeals, he's actually used a very, very old one because it's got Hurricane Sandy, Imagine No More Malaria. Sometimes we actually update them and put them on here. But your 6 special Sundays are here, and then anything else like that, a special offering, if the bishop calls for a special offering for, he did during COVID, there was a request for funds for food ministries. They would go on this form and say food ministries or whatever the name of it was, food ministries and the amount. Does that answer, Diane?
So the advance number goes there too, yes.
If there's an advance number, it goes there too.
All right, thank you.
This creates one document, which means that the following month that you have sent it in, you'll get a statement, and the statement would have it on here someplace. If it was not apportionments, it was benevolences, whatever it was, it would show on your statement that you submitted that money. Okay. Now, he put at the end of this some job descriptions, which are fine, but I want to go to another, and I know it's almost 4, but I want to go to another PowerPoint because I want to show you the forms that you need to send to Karen. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second and try to pull up the other one quickly, okay? Oh, come on. Okay. So this is a form and I am going to make it bigger for you. Fund balance report form is a form required from every single church. It's to be completed annually between January 1st and February 1st. And I will tell Karen Monk that if you said March 1st, we would all be happier. Because this one has to be done once you get your final statements from all of your various funding sources.
I can assure you most people have not had it in by February 1st. However, we will be continuing to hound you for it, but thank you.
All right, so this is the fund balance of all the funds that you have in your church. So your general fund would be the operating fund. So in January 1st, what was your fund? How much did you receive in that fund? How much did you disperse? And what was your balance at the end of the year? So if you're keeping good treasurer reports and you have your bank statements, this is a very easy thing to do. If you have a special benevolent fund, if you have a capital campaign, you might have opened up a checking account for that campaign that would be operated by the trustees. So they would have it, that's what they would have. The Board of Trustees have money. United Methodist Women, Youth Fellowship, United Methodist Men. If your church school is large enough that they have their own fund, then it would be them. Any other funds you have in your church. Most church school money is included in the general fund in these days, unless you have a huge Sunday school. So all of that is on this particular form. And that is sent to Karen Yospeel for Karen Monk.
Yes.
We call them Karen Y and Karen M. This is the second part of the form, auditing committee. If you had your books audited, recommendations that they might have stated, and the signature of the chairperson and a member, all of that very done yearly. To be part of becomes part of your DNA for finances. Now the next one is the report of the finance committee. And this is the one that many people think is the audit. This is just the report. Pretty self-explanatory. Answer the questions. Number 2A, for example, says, has the committee submitted to the church council or its equivalent a complete budget for the ensuing year? Now, if your church conference is in September, which some of them are, you may not have done that yet. Just tell them why. You're not going to do your budget until November. Some churches are electing to do their budget in January, which is what my church did in New Paltz. We do our budget in January, approve it in February. Did the committee give the church council an opportunity to request financial support for recommended ministries? That's what I talked about before when you ask all of your committees, what is their dream? How often do the statements go out? And you'd be surprised the number of churches who do not send out reports. Is the individual participants of the local church regularly reviewed? That's something that the financial secretary would have to answer. And she can answer that whatever she or he, however they do it or not. Does the financial secretary treasurer report regularly to the church council on the giving trends in the church? If not, why? You should be, as a finance committee, both the treasurer and the financial secretary, there should be a report every single month. Whether or not you have a church council meeting, you should do the report every month. And then it should be provided on paper and of course, there's no names of the givers, but there should be a written report given to church council. Remember, this is not secret information. It is public information. You also could leave some reports when you go back to church. Once a quarter, you might give a report to your congregation. And then they ask about the handling of church funds. And one of the questions, where's the question that states, one of the questions, it says, have your church records been audited? And many people think that this is the audit and they check yes. And that's the end of it. This says that if you put yes, it means that Karen can come and say to you, could I have a copy of your church audit? Or she could say to us, I would like you to submit your church audit with this report. Your church audit should be done. If this report is due by the end of February, early March, that's when your audit should be done. By the end of the first quarter, because you do want to wait. This is a case where you want to wait till you have all of your bank statements from your various funds.
Margaret, we have a question in the chat. Are electronic signatures acceptable or able to be used?
Right now, yes. Now, the other thing is, if you're smart, you get yourself an electronic signature, which is your own, versus creating an electronic signature that is truly electronic. So if you want an electronic signature of your real signature, let me know. We have a way of getting it for you very easily. Karen, you should know that Beth Packus will do it for us, as long as we don't give her 20 at the same time. And so therefore it would be your signature and it would be acceptable. That was a very good question. And right now during the pandemic, if you don't have a real signature, you can use one of those lovely calligraphy fonts for your signature. And we'll say what lovely penmanship you have. Any questions about those two reports? Because I do know that Karen Y, if she hasn't already, will be asking for these. It has to be signed. All right, now here's another piece of information that I thought might be helpful for you. And this is the resolution that was made at our annual conference on minimal coverage for insurance. This is something that you pay the insurance bill, but the trustees are the people who solicit someone to come in and review your church to give you the rate, and you decide, the council decides for it, and with the trustees' advice, who will be the vendor for your insurance. Church Mutual and what's the other one? Guide One are the two primary insurance companies that churches use for church insurance. And with that comes the bonding. Both of those will make sure that your people are bonded. But one of the things that they're looking for is, do you have, they'll want to see your safe sanctuary policy. They will also look at your accessibility. And are you accessible or not? Could you be or not? To have you moving along that particular mode of operation. Workman's compensation. If you are a church, you are part of the New York Annual Conference Workman's Compensation. It is across the conference. That bill will come in your statement with your health insurance, and then there's a true up or true down later in the year. If you recently received a form from Ross that asked you to put in information about the salary of your pastor and your employees, that was to create the money, the amount of money. And if you have a play school or preschool, that information was required, whether it was part of your church or independent. So if you have a church school in your building, a preschool in your building, more so the trustees than finance committee, you need to know about the operation of that. Is it church run? And how is it church run? Who writes the checks? How does the money come through? Where does it come through? Do you have an account? What are the pass-throughs? Probably there should be some auditing done of our church school policies that are run by the church. Some churches have elected to have their churches go independent, but they're still housed in the church, and the church has a relationship. But because there would be insurance required for that play school, for that preschool. If it's independent, then the church is only responsible for the liability on the church building that they're using, not on the individuals. That would be their responsibility. So you need to probably, if you have play schools, we should take a look at them to see how they are operating. He wanted to do, but didn't totally finish before he retires. The other thing I put in is, this is a sample of a counter sheet. It happens to be one that I use in my church. And there's things in there, you create your own, but the more that you can spell out in your counter sheet, the better it will be for the people that need to use the data from this. Because the financial secretary will use the data that's at the top part, but other people may need to know more about the data on the other part, the dinners, the cost of dinners. Do you get money from your 12-step groups, your 12-step groups that are in there? Who else might be using your building that's paying you a user fee? You don't want to just lump that in. You want to know that you had a concert and this was the income that you got from this concert. We do identify all of our various user groups. We don't charge them any money, but every one of the 12-step groups in my church makes a financial contribution because they feel that it's right to do so. Whoops, sorry about that. We have one group that says we're paying you $200 a month, no matter what, because you provide us with a kitchen. We don't have to buy coffee cups. We use your coffee cups. We don't have to buy coffee. We use your coffee. We pay $200 a month. Others put into their bucket whatever they can afford.
Margaret, we have a quick time check. It is 4:10.
Okay, so I am going to, the last one that I have was just make the Book of Discipline, which states about the Finance Committee. So I am done. There's lots of other things that we can talk about and lots of things that could be more in detail. I'm available. If you want to talk about any of these, I will come to your church, or we can do it via Zoom, any number of ways. So I thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this. Would someone like to close us in a quick prayer?
Well, I do want to say thank you, Margaret. I think we all appreciate Margaret's expertise and long time experience in finance and stewardship. Yay. Thank you, Margaret.
Hey, finances are boring.
But they're important. You're all, and thank you all for attending to a long meeting on the first day of spring. Pastor Paul, after we've said some things about clergy, Pastor Paul, would you mind closing us with prayer?
Certainly. Let us pray. Loving God, we thank you for this time of fellowship together, this time of learning and reviewing what it takes to be good stewards of our ministries and the funds associated with those. Help us to keep in mind that everything we're doing is to your glory. May the Holy Spirit guide us as we make financial decisions for everything that we're in charge of, every committee, every budget, every penny. Help us to be attentive to the voice of the Spirit. Help us to be in tune with our communities where we serve so that we can come up with ministries that need our attention and our help. Bless us as we go our separate ways this beautiful day, and keep us all in your loving care. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all for attending. Peace
Bye.
be with you.
You well, be safe.
Bye.
And a blessed Easter.
Have a great afternoon.
Bye, thank you.